The geological history of the Picos de Europa dates back to the Carboniferous period. Over 300 million years ago, the limestone that dominated the mountain range was gradually deposited on a marine platform until reaching a thickness of over 1,000 meters. But it was approximately 30 or 35 million years ago that the orogenic forces became active again, and at the same time as causing the Pyrenees and the Alps to emerge, they raised what are now the Picos de Europa. Subsequently, the glaciation of the Quaternary and karstic phenomena sculpted the park's orogeny, and it's to this action that we owe such symbolic places as Lakes Enol and Ercina within the Covandonga mountain area. The last glaciation of the Quaternary took place 15,000 years ago at a time when prehistoric man had already settled in these territories. The history of man and the Picos de Europa has been very intense from the outset. From the time of the Celts who worshipped the god Vindius, these mountains have had a sacred character. Subsequently, their relation with the battle and victory of King Pelayo against the Moslems, the origin of the Reconquest of Spain, finished by transforming them into a symbolic place revered by its inhabitants. Descendants of those first settlers of the Quaternary period have survived to this day, and man continues to live inside the park. Pasturing is an activity which dates back centuries and which is still permitted within the protected area. Flocks of small sheep, herds of Pyrenean goats and Asturian mountain cows share the meadows, producing the milk that serves to make the region's exquisite artisan cheeses. When the Covandonga Mountain National Park was created, precursor to the present-day Picos de Europa Park, which encompasses it, locals were already grazing their flocks in the region, which is why they were allowed to continue with their domestic animals. Man's pressure on nature then began to intensify. Wild animals gradually started taking shelter in the protected areas, while their numbers began to decline in the forests that were free of restrictions. However, for the men living within these protected areas where hunting was forbidden, the sheltering of certain species within them didn't take long in developing into a problem. For farmers, the increase of herbivores within the reserves represented a continuous threat to their crops, while shepherds and livestock farmers looked on in concern as wild carnivores sought refuge in the areas where they grazed their herds. Among the latter were the shepherds of the Picos de Europa, because within the park, in the same areas where cows, sheep and domestic goats roam, lives the wolf, the most powerful predator of the Spanish forest. In primitive societies, when man was still a hunter and gatherer, the wolf was a totemic figure that was admired and respected. But when agricultural and livestock societies began to develop, wolves became competitors that occasionally killed domestic animals, and their image changed from that powerful totemic figure into the personification of evil. With an ever-diminishing habitat due to human pressure and the increasing scarcity of its natural prey, the wolf occasionally resorts to domestic animals to feed itself. To compensate their protection with the damage they cause to shepherds in the park, the authorities pay for the animals that the wolves kill, although they are often attributed the deaths of sheep and goats that have been caused by attacks of cimarrones, domestic dogs turned wild that hunt in packs and aren't afraid of man's presence. The black legend of this super predator has given rise to its indiscriminate hunting and persecution. Little over a century ago, wolves were spread throughout Europe. Today, only Italy, Portugal and Spain still count the wolf among their natural heritage. The wolf's eating habits make it dependent on large-sized prey, such as deer, roebuck and wild boar. In places where these animals abound, wolves rarely attack domestic herds because centuries of persecution and slaughter has taught them to fear man and distance themselves from human settlements. The wolf is a fundamental part in the balance of the ecosystem. Without the pressure of predators, herbivores multiply unchecked and end up by exhausting the plant cover that feeds them. By hunting them, wolves control their numbers and indirectly protect the natural environment by forcing their prey to move when fleeing from their attacks. In this way, vegetation recovers and herbivores do not exceed the number that can be supported by the ecosystem. The wolf also makes a natural selection process by eliminating the weakest or maimed animals, so that it strengthens the herbivore populations on which it feeds.